Hello, my name is Don Elliott, and I am a director with Clarion Associates, which is the prime contractor on an ambitious project by Fairfax County to update its zoning ordinance. The project is called zMOD, and it includes two key parts. Number one is reorganizing the entire zoning ordinance to make it easier for the public to understand and to make it more internally consistent. The second is to substantively update the lists and the names and the regulations of land uses that are allowed or not allowed or conditionally allowed in different parts of the county. Clarion Associates has been working for over 2.5 years with the county and with citizens and stakeholders on this project. And this video is to tell you that a full draft that has been reviewed and revised several times is now available for public comment on the zMOD website. We very much want you to review it and make comments. And this video is to summarize the project and some of the key changes that are being recommended. So, why update the zoning ordinance? Well, to begin with, the current one is really hard to use. It's 1,200 pages long, located in 26 different PDF files that can't be linked or searched together. The new draft, which is now available for review, is 700 pages long in one integrated document that has hyperlinks to allow you to move around within the document and search the entire document. Much more user-friendly. Secondly, uses have changed since 1978. Back then, we didn't have electric vehicle charging stations, and we didn't have personal trainers, and we didn't have trampoline parks, and we didn't have cat cafes. So there have been substantive changes, additions, deletions, consolidations to update those. Third, the current ordinance is full of legal jargon, notwithstanding heretofore, all of that we're getting rid of and trying to use plain English so that it's understandable to a person without an engineering or a law degree. And finally, we needed to come up with a zoning ordinance that was going to be accessible not just on a desktop or in printed version, but on a smartphone or on a tablet that people can use out in the field as they're looking at projects, as they're looking at their neighbor's project, as they're looking to buy land in Fairfax County, and to understand in the field and easily what the rules are. All four of those reasons have been achieved in the draft that is before you now. Let's talk about simplifying the language, first of all. Here's an example of one area where you've simplified the language. It goes from 101 words to 58 words. Notwithstanding is gone. We're very clear about will or must, very clear English about whether you are encouraged or you need to do this in order to develop in Fairfax County. One key change is that throughout the ordinance, instead of referring to minimum yards, we refer to building setbacks. No one ever comes in and says, what's my minimum yard? They say, how far does the building have to be set back? And that is clear in the current ordinance. This is an area where staff is continuing to try to work to make the existing draft even simpler and clearer in plain English. Another way we've tried to simplify this is by using more graphics and charts and drawings and relating them to one another. So, for example, here's an example from a zoning district, which includes a drawing of a building on a lot of about the scale that is allowed in that district, and a table which tells you building height, setback, lot size, trying to communicate visually rather than in long run-on sentences or lists what someone can do with their property. We think this is a good way to convey information much more clearly to, again, people who don't live and breathe zoning, but have to pick it up from time to time to find out whether they can do something or whether their neighbor can do something. Let's move on from the things that have been done to make the code more user-friendly and graphically rich to substantive changes in the special exception, special permit, and permitted uses in different areas of the county. There are several ways to update uses. One is to give it a more modern name. Another one is to add new uses. A third is to consolidate existing uses. And a fourth is to change the standards that apply to different uses in different parts of the county. All four of those have been done, and we're going to walk through them individually. First, sometimes it's just a matter of giving a simpler name to a use. The current zoning ordinance has a use called chapel, church, temple, synagogue, or other place of worship. That's being renamed religious assembly. Shorter, sweeter, more flexible. The second way to do it is to add new uses. For example, goods distribution hub, or stacked townhouses, or data centers are all uses that are not named in the current zoning ordinance. Staff had to make some interpretations as to whether they were allowed or not based on other uses that were really not very similar. And then again, brand new uses, such as doggy day bars, or cat cafes, or electric vehicle charging stations. let's talk about some additional new uses. Pet grooming establishment, live, work, catering, or alternative use of a historic building. You'll find these new uses footnoted in the draft throughout the code. Alternative use of a historic building is a new name, and it's intended to allow the Board of Supervisors to issue a special exception to allow a non-residential use of a property that's listed on the county inventory of historic sites. It's flexible, it's much more tailored to what might be appropriate to the buildings and what you have now, and it allows a nuanced judgment. Is this appropriate in this older building in the county? We think it'll provide a good incentive for the reuse of those historic structures. Another way to modernize uses is to consolidate existing uses, because fewer, more flexible, broader use categories make it much easier to administer the code, and also because the market can think up new uses faster than we can name them, faster than the county can amend the code each time something new is named. So throughout the country, communities are moving towards broader, more flexible use categories. One example in this case is outdoor commercial recreation. The current ordinance has 10 different specialized types of outdoor recreation, some by special permit, some by special exception. It's confusing to figure out exactly which standards apply to which type of outdoor recreation. Those have been consolidated into a single category with a single set of standards related to them. Another example, and one that is worth really paying attention to, is home-based businesses. Currently, the zoning ordinance has a home occupation category and a home professional office category and a barbershop, beauty shop category. Again, very confusing as to the lines between them and why they're regulated so differently, and they have been consolidated into one use. Now, this is a topic where there's a lot of continued discussion. We all know lots of folks are doing more work at home, and that was true even before the COVID-19 pandemic came along. But how much is too much? And how do you regulate the impacts on the neighbors while allowing people to earn a living from their houses, which is a very powerful trend throughout the country. So the current draft says that in a single family district, single family home, you could have up to 4 folks at a time at your home-based business and up to 8 in the course of a day. That is the current regulation. There have been comments that this may be too much, and so county staff is considering whether it ought to be limited to 2 customers at a time and maybe only 6 in the course of a day. We'd love your thoughts on that. Everybody is trying to find the right balance between freedom to use your property to do something that doesn't have much impact, and when does it create too much impact. Under any of these proposals, the draft says that you would have to have customers by appointment, and they'd have to be separated by gaps of 15 minutes. This is a topic that's been presented several times, and I do urge you to get on the zMOD website and give your thoughts as to what the right balance is. Let's move on. A fourth way to update uses is to update the standards related to those uses, and I'd like to give you 2 examples. First, decks and patios. The current ordinance allows decks and patios to extend into your side and rear setbacks a certain amount, but not if they had any features on them like lattices, planter boxes, trellises. The revised draft said, okay, trellises below the level of the deck are fine. And in addition, things like trellises and privacy screens would be allowed up to a height of 8.5 feet on 2 sides of the deck. And in addition, pergolas, things like that would be allowed up to 8.5 feet tall and up to 3 feet wide. And in addition, it clarifies that these kind of limitations don't apply if your deck is at grade. If your deck is at grade, there is not as much concern about tall features annoying or interfering with your neighbor's use of their property. The second important example is accessory living units, ALUs. A very active discussion going on now. Accessory living units are secondary units in a single family house or on a single family house property. Many of these regulations are being carried over from the current accessory dwelling unit regulations. The draft renames it as accessory living unit because when you say accessory dwelling unit, people tend to say ADU, but Fairfax County uses ADU to mean affordable dwelling unit. So henceforth, think about accessory living unit. So most of the regulations on ALUs have been carried forward unchanged, but I'd like to talk about 3 key areas. 1 is the maximum size of an ALU, 2 is the amount of parking you have to provide, and 3 is the kind of permit you need to have. The current draft that you would find on the zMOD website says that the maximum size of an ALU inside your house is 40% of the house size itself, or 800 square feet. It says you do not need to provide an additional parking space, but you have to designate one on your site. And in Fairfax County, that means a single-family house has to have 2 or 3 parking spaces. And it says that the permit that you get to get an ALU would need to be reviewed every 5 years. Now, those 3 topics are still under discussion as follows. There is a proposal, not in the draft, but under discussion, that says maybe if the ALU is inside your house and in a basement, it shouldn't be limited to the 800 square feet because your basement might be bigger than that, and it's hard to subdivide a basement. That's under discussion. Second, there is a proposal that you should be required to provide 1 more parking space on your site. So instead of 2 or 3, you'd have to provide 3 or 4. Sounds simple, but it's not, because the county also regulates how much of your front yard area can be used for parking. So if you could accommodate 3, but you can't accommodate 4, then you would not be able to do an ALU. It's an important change under discussion over parking. Finally, the draft says that your permit would be reviewed every 5 years, and there's a proposal to make that 2 years, or maybe 2 years for the first 2 years, so that we ensure that people are actually using ALUs the way they're required to be used under the zoning ordinance. One more slide on areas in which the standards that apply to different primary and accessory uses are proposed to be changed. One is solar collectors. Because the county wants to encourage the installation of these, the draft says that if you install these, on the roof of your home, you could be allowed to exceed the maximum height that would otherwise apply to your house or building by 5 feet. Why? Because some buildings are built right up to the maximum height, and if they can't put a solar collector on without getting a variance, they won't. So this is to encourage that and say there's an allowance for this particular type of piece of equipment to be put on top of a house. Second, food trucks. Food trucks are really not allowed in residential districts now, and there have been folks saying, but they should be allowed on things like in non-residential properties in residential districts. So for instance, swimming pools, community centers, churches, schools. So the draft says you could have food trucks at events on those non-residential properties in residential districts. Up to a 4-hour period, up to 12 times a year, and that's under discussion right now. There is a provision that the board could approve longer periods or more of them if it wants to. Finally, the current ordinance uses a bulk plane and a technical angle to describe how the top parts of taller buildings have to be set back from the property lines. That turned out to be very complicated and sometimes to require an engineer to figure out where exactly the building had to be located on the site. That angled formula has been replaced by some tables, simplified tables, that replicate basically the rough same setbacks for different tall buildings, but are much easier for people to understand by just looking at a table, looking at the height of the building, and understanding how far it has to be set back. Let's walk through a real life example, a little bit humorous, but it's a real life example about how you could find out how the new uses work on a particular piece of property. Are they allowed? Who approves them? Under what circumstances, and what are the criteria that are going to be used? So let's use this as an example. A cat lounge. So I'm an entrepreneur looking for a commercial location for my cat lounge. Where can I do it? So last year, staff received this request. And not surprisingly, current zoning ordinance doesn't say what to do with a cat cafe. So they had to make an interpretation of it. And believe it or not, the closest interpretation they could find, something that they knew how to regulate because it was in the ordinance, is indoor archery, firing range, and other similar use. Now, A, that's a bit of a stretch between that and a cat cafe. And B, how would the public ever know or predict that an application for a cat cafe would be interpreted that way? So how do you address that? Under the new draft ordinance, that use would be included in the broader indoor commercial recreation use. Well, indoor commercial recreation is a lot easier to understand as a place. It's not just a food or drink. There's something going on here. There's entertainment. There's recreation going on. People are coming to see the cats. So that is a closer and a much more easy use for the public to find in the zoning ordinance. So I'd like to play a little video now. I'm going to press play and walk you through how you would get on the zMOD website and find this if you wanted to walk through for yourself. Okay, let's walk through the cat cafe example. So first thing you do, go to the zMOD website, click on the link for the consolidated draft and scroll down. There's a red box. Review the consolidated zoning ordinance public draft. Takes you there. Now you're in the draft of the zoning ordinance. Go to the table of contents and scroll down to Article 4. Article 4 is the use regulations, and those are the things that have been substantively updated. When you click, it's hyperlinked, takes you there. So we're in Article 4 now. And it's got some introductory information, and then it goes into how the uses are classified. Down the left-hand column, all the uses in Fairfax County are listed. Gold bar is the biggest category. The ivory bar is the classification, and then individual uses are in the white lines, the white boxes. And for each zone district listed across the top, it tells you whether it's allowed or not allowed. Let's go down to commercial recreation indoor, which is where we said cat cafes are now categorized. In each zoning district where it's allowed or not allowed, blank means it's not allowed, and the other initials tell you whether you need a special exception, special permit, or it is permitted. Then go over to the right-hand column and click on the standards that apply to that, and that's hyperlinked too. So now we have jumped to right after the table to commercial recreation indoor. And these are the standards, and it tells you if it's permitted, this applies. If you have to get a special permit, that applies. If you have to get a special exception, that applies. And then you can go to the end of the document and look at the definition just to make sure. And again, this will be a hover over feature in the end. So now you know how to find the use in the left-hand column of the table. You need to know how to find whether it's permitted in that zone district and who has to approve it in the middle of the table. And you know what special conditions would apply to that use in the location where it's proposed. Now, the fourth piece of the puzzle is the definitions. And until they're in a hover over situation in the final online code, you can find them in Article 9. Article 9 contains a definition for each and every use in this table. We've worked hard to try to make them clear, to indicate in footnotes what's included in them, and to make sure they don't overlap other similar uses. This is a big improvement over what is in the current zoning ordinance. So what is next? Well, as I mentioned, for the past 2.5 years, county staff has been working with us and with citizens and stakeholders. They've briefed the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors several times, and they've met with citizens and neighborhood and interest groups throughout the county. In fact, there have been 5 different rounds of opportunities to comment on the use updates and 4 different rounds of opportunities to comment on the rest of the reorganized zoning ordinance. There's been a lot of opportunity for comment, and that will continue. Between now and early fall, staff will be continuing to meet with people upon request or honor scheduled meetings and to make further refinements, to hear what people have to say and make further refinements, which will result in an updated version, a revised consolidated draft in about the late fall of this year. So there's going to be briefings for the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors in October, followed by a revised draft to try to further tailor this to the comments that have been made. And then headed into early 2021, begin the hearing process. Now in Fairfax County, there'll first be a request to start the public hearing process, and then the public hearing process will continue. So there's another 6 months, 5 months of time to read, comment, ask questions, and we really urge you to do so. Once that process has been completed and the new zoning ordinance has been adopted, county staff will move to convert the ordinance into a portable, searchable, user-friendly online platform, one that can be used with tablets or smartphones, as well as computers, or if you want, in a printed version. That's going to have some cool features, including hover over boxes like the definitions, hyperlinks, and different ways of jumping around in the document to try to get the answer faster than you could in the current ordinance. Stay tuned, because they're now researching which platform and which approach would be most acceptable and usable and appropriate for Fairfax County. County staff and the elected and appointed officials have put a lot of time into trying to make this not only better, but tailored to help the county achieve its planning goals and to make it a better way of controlling how neighborhood impacts, how neighbors impact or don't impact each other, and allowing the county to continue to compete in the global economy. It's a very important initiative, and I really urge you to get involved, stay involved, ask questions, and let the county know what you think about the proposal and how it could be improved. Thank you.